everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and welcome to night 2 of the 2022 ChemKnits Chanukah special. Every night of Chanukah I will be sharing a new yarn dyeing video featuring different colors and techniques so that way we can celebrate Chanukah together. Tonight we are going to dye some variegated yarn. A lot of times I lean for more random, less repeating patterns, and I really wanted to do something more traditionally repeating. But I wondered if there was a way that I could speed up not the dyeing process, but the color processing, the heating process, without having the colors bleed into each other too much. The idea, which I'll talk about as I start dyeing the yarn, is something that I'd been thinking about for a while, and I was really excited to give this a shot. And as we go get started, please subscribe and turn on notifications and give the video a thumbs up. I pre-soaked the yarn in just some plain tap water overnight. We are going to be dyeing a lot of 10-gram mini skeins that are 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon in both fingering and DK weight. Initially, I had a slightly different idea for our color palette today, but we are going to create our variegated colorway using 3 colors of Dharma acid dyes: bright aqua, teal green, and dark navy. We're going to start by just adding 200 grams of yarn into our dye bath. And here I'm adding 100 grams of fingering weight and 100 grams of DK. I don't think that the difference in weights will matter here. And now I'm going to bring over some more water. There is no acid in here yet. And I'm going to add, goodness, maybe 5 cups of water or so, enough to cover our yarn a bit. But now, since we're going to be using our dry dye powder to dye, I'm going to go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and a pair of gloves. There is no acid in our pan yet. And we're going to start adding the first color. I'm going to take some bright aqua and I am sprinkling it on. Remember, there's no acid in here yet. I will be sort of helping this dissolve onto the yarn in a moment, but I wanted to start at least with spreading it out a little bit. Now I'm going to cover the dye jar and come in with my gloved hand to spread out this color. I could have dissolved the dye first. This is going to give maybe a little less even coverage, but it's a fun way to do it. And, well, I have an idea of something I want to try, but we'll get to that a little later. Our yarn mop today is going to be a little different. It's dry yarn, and I will be wiping my gloved hands off on there before drying them with a paper towel. No idea how well this will work, but we're going to give it a shot. Okay, now I'm coming in with some teal green, and I'm doing the same kind of thing, trying to spread out the dye. I don't want it to clump on the yarn, that's why I'm attempting to spread it out a bit. But then we're going to come and work it through the yarn. And I don't think, this is something that I've done like while yarn is hot. I've worked dye through kind of like this, but I don't think I've ever tried this starting cold with powder, at least not in this order. I may have though, but not quite like this. Now I'm not sure how far the dye is penetrating into the fiber, and so that is something that we will look at in a moment. Now I'm coming in with our dark navy, which often is a color I try to avoid for Chanukah because I love navy. Navy is one of my favorite colors to use, just in general, and so a lot of times I try to avoid it. It may look a little bit purpley, but it'll look more and more blue as time goes on. And I can add more of it if I want some more, as here I am working it through. And so this
is basically our colorway, but the color definitely has not gone all the way through the yarn, and I'm going to want to dye the other side of our yarn. So what I'm going to try to do is sort of gently flip the yarn over, hopefully without moving the colors around too much. If they do, well, that kind of is what it is, but we're trying this. There is going to be some blending of the colors. I see some navy traveling up. Again, I'm sort of trying this out to see how it goes, and you know, we had a little bit more blue travel up, but we're going to layer on colors again. However, since there is no acid in here, you can see how soft these colors are that we've got right now. Okay, coming in with more navy. I want to deepen this up. And spread the yarn back out. I'm a little concerned about that flip, but you'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. The first layer of yarn that maybe gave something away is one of the ones that I'm most concerned with. We're bringing in some more teal. Now, since these are mini skeins, that means that the way that the colors are working and the way the colors are penetrating are a little different because it's a little smaller. But I'm happy with where we are there with the deepness, and I do want to keep that other end a little bit light. That is my hope and my goal. Okay, but now, hopefully this isn't too much of our bright aqua, but I do like the brightness of it, and I wanted to bring a little bit more of that in and down on the yarn. Now, if we end up with a lot of white patches or anything on here, I can always over dye the entire thing with the blue, but this was our starting point. Now, I want to do something I've thought about for a while. Like, how much yarn can I dye in a pan? How much can I add more yarn and sort of level things up in here? So what I think I want to do is add, not a ton, but add a little bit more powder. I guess we have no acid in here yet, so it's not as though things have really started to set. So I'm unsure about adding more powder. That might be a mistake. But for this next layer, we are going to have some dye here already, right? Because we have the dye from these first two layers. And I originally was not going to cut my fingers in, but I need to get the dye off somehow. So I think with the aqua, I'm not going to add any more dye at this stage. But now what I want to do is add 200 grams of more yarn, but just on top. And we're layering this on top, so it's already going to get access to some dye from what was on that first layer, right? You can see some color coming up and in already. But now we're also going to add more color on top. And I don't know how many times we would be able to do this. Especially with no acid in here. But you can see we've already sort of soaked in some of that color. I don't know if this is going to dilute what we had on that first layer, but this is something that I've thought about a lot. I spent a lot of time thinking about this general idea, and whether, you know, you can keep coloring and layering your colors and then sort of heat set it all at once later on. Because if you can, and you're like me and you have more limited pan space, then that is something that really, really could work. Now, part of me is unsure about not having acid in here yet, but part of me feels like it might be okay because we're continuing to layer these similar colors. But again, if at some point I feel like we don't have enough pigment, we can always over dye the yarn in another stage. So we're just going to do the best we can. Now, when I added on the second layer, I did not squeeze it out very much. And that was a little harder to position. So I think for the third layer, and at the third layer we'll probably stop. We'll just try that. Then I think I will add the yarn a little bit drier, but then add some water on top of it. At least that is my initial gut feeling of what I would like to do. And the reason why I'm only doing 200 grams of yarn in each layer is because that is going to allow me to just get more color coverage on the layer itself, and so there's going to be just more surface area. But a quick little peek in here, seems like we're getting pretty good coverage. So, I mean, maybe we could try 800 grams. I've never dyed 800 grams of yarn in one pan before. So I don't know. I don't know how well this will work. I may need to do 2 rounds of the navy color still over here, because I do want that to be reasonably saturated. But also maybe not. And I do want to try to make sure to blend the colors. I mean, so far so good, right? Round 3, I did squeeze out more of the liquid, at least a bit. Yeah, that makes it a little bit easier to just spread it out. Even though I think I did get some dye on my gloves on the yarn, so I'm rotating a little navy section that I see further down, so that way it can kind of go in an appropriate kind of spot. And now when I'm going to go and start pressing the colors through, I'm starting with the lightest color. And then I'm slowly moving down to the deeper one. Actually, Rebecca, you should take note of this. This could be a fun way to do a fade as well. To do the dye and then to do other layers like that. Because I think each layer would get a little lighter, a little lighter. Again, I have no idea what's going to happen at the bottom, but let's carry on.
I used a turkey baster to carefully add some more liquid onto the yarn. So that way, as I continue to sprinkle color on and work it through, there's water for that dye to dissolve in to try to deliver it onto the yarn. Now, I am so curious what things will look like when I pick them up, if I'm going to see light patches that I've missed. But for my little peeks, it does appear that the colors are working through pretty well. So after I finished adding dye for this third layer, I went ahead and added a fourth. I don't think that going beyond 800 grams is advisable. This catering steam pan I'm using is full size and 4 inches deep, which is why I'm able to layer on so much yarn. But I think that if I were to do more than this, then maybe things might start to fall through at some point. And so now that I'm satisfied with our color, it's time for us to add some acid and to start heat setting the yarn. Phew! Oh, wait. That was that was awesome. I love where this is. Again, I have no idea what it's gonna look like once we heat it up. I have no idea how much of the color has traveled down, but that's gonna be really, really fun to see. All right, I am going to start adding acid. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's go ahead and add just like 2 more. That's, I think, 10 tablespoons of white vinegar. Now, that is a fair amount of acid for our volume of water. However, remember that we have not added any acid here yet, and so I'm trying to help work that through our yarn without, and this is the key, I'm trying to not move liquid from, say, here down there, at least not too much. I definitely see some navy creep over here on the side, but we now have acid throughout the yarn, plus the first acid I've added to my yarn mops thus far. And now what I really want to do is to start applying heat to it. I would like to apply some heat so that way we can start setting these colors. But I am gonna go ahead and wait, I think, for 20 minutes and just let the yarn sit here, because some amount of the colors will start to strike just at room temperature, and therefore maybe we'll have less movement once we go and start heat setting it. Now, one of the ideas that I did have just in general with this project would be, it would be fun to set something like this up, maybe do more layers and then go set it outside to let the color sit overnight and to set, and then steam set later on. That's not what we're gonna do today, but that is something that I might do another day. So I think that, yeah, we're just going to wait 20 minutes and then we'll come back. But the reason why I'm not gonna go start heating it without adding more water is that the yarn is very compressed in here and I don't want anything to burn. And so that's why we'll wait 20 minutes, then we'll add some more water and acid, and then we're gonna start heat setting. It's been 20 minutes and let's just check. Well, that's looking pretty clear. So is this. Okay, I'm still seeing some navy, but a lot of this color has cleared. There's a lot that hasn't, but a lot has. And so that is pretty exciting. Now, here I have 3 tablespoons of white vinegar in 8 cups of water. And I'm slowly adding it on to our yarn. I do not want things to spread a ton, but I want to decompress things a little bit so that way we can go and start heating things up. Just a bit. Let's see. Okay, let's add a little more. And you'll probably notice that I'm adding the yarn from this side at the top, mainly because, yeah, I don't want to push the blue that way. So that is the reason for the direction. But now let's go to the stove. If I had foil, I would probably cover this. But instead, I currently have the heat on high. I'm going to leave the heat on high for not too long, hopefully. Hopefully not that long. But I am starting to see some movement here. It is definitely not warm yet, but I am going to sort of hang out over here, hover, until everything is nice and hot. And then I'll come back and check in. Okay, very quickly, I'm starting to get a little bit of some steam. And so I am just gonna keep an eye on things and add more liquid. Because, I don't know, I'm not loving the sounds I'm hearing. I do see some teal movement over on the side. And yeah, it's sounding very different from what I'm used to. But let's see. Okay, it's not feeling that warm yet, but I'm a little concerned about the yarn that's like towards the bottom.
Okay, I mean, I think that what I'm going to do now is reduce the heat from high to more medium. We are starting to get some pockets of steam. Nothing feels warm yet, but there is warmth, I guess, that is coming. And so I guess I'll feel a little less nervous once we see more of this navy kind of strike. So let's just let some more vinegar we'll add down there. I do have a timer set for 20 minutes and I am going to keep checking in on our yarn. But there isn't that much yarn left to dye because I was able to get a lot of it in this single pan. So yeah, I'll check back in soon. Maybe honestly solar dyeing and then steam setting it would be preferable to what I'm trying to do here, which I'm starting to feel a little ambitious. Maybe that's the right word. After about 10 minutes, there is heat throughout the entire thing. We still have a little bit of some blue down here on the navy section, so I am going to carefully watch things, but every once in a while I've been coming with the spoon and just shimmying the yarn a little bit and just adding a little bit more water because that's slowly gonna let the yarn float a little bit more and then maybe dye can access another area if it needs to. But from here, I am going to heat things for 30 minutes. Checking in very frequently still. All right, it has been 30 minutes and the water is looking pretty darn clear to me, which is great. So now I am going to turn off the heat completely and leave the yarn in here to cool for a bit because I want to remove the yarn and sort of see what we have below, but I would like it to be a little bit cooler when I do that. Plus additional heat isn't gonna hurt the yarn and might be good and help make sure those colors are well set. It's really hard not to peek. I'm resisting, but I really just kind of want to peel back these layers and see what we have. I'm resisting. I'm resisting. I'm trying. Meanwhile, I still have 550 grams of yarn to dye. So I set up a new pan to dye the rest of this yarn using the same yarn mop I had been using before to wipe off my wet hands. This time though, I decided to add a little bit of dye to the bottom of the pan before adding in my first skeins of yarn, hoping that this might help some of the color spread through that bottom layer a bit because I didn't want to have to flip the yarn as much as I had done in the other rounds. I didn't add that dye like all over the bottom layer, but a bit because I thought it might help a little bit. I continued on layering the yarn and dye, working it through with my gloved fingertips. Of course I was wearing my respirator mask until I was satisfied with the depth of color that we had here. Next I added a bunch of the acid to the yarn, worked it through, let the yarn sit for 20 minutes before bringing it to the stove to heat set our yarn for at least 30 minutes. I have the second set of yarn on our original burners, which is why the orientation is now different. But let's start removing the yarn. Things are still warm. It's probably been like an hour maybe. And let's see. So if I flip this, we got really good color penetration. Really, really good. All right. I'm gonna remove some water, put that in a secondary pan, and let's peel off layer 2, where I'm also happy to say we have good coverage. It's a little light in one spot, but not bad. Not bad at all. Oh my goodness. All right. The third layer is also looking really good. Hey, we still have bright blue there. All right, I've got my first light patch here, but honestly, this worked super, super well. We've got really good coverage. This could have been done with liquid dyes instead of powders,
but sometimes when I'm dealing with liquid dyes, I don't know how much to mix up, and then I mix up too much. And then when you add it, this was actually easier to move through the yarn and to add. Oh, I'm happy. And we've got good coverage on our original layer too. There's a little area where maybe some navy went up a little more, but this worked. This stacking, oh yeah, I can see some evidence of some navy going up there. But this stacking method worked. And honestly, it would have worked just as a single layer as well, but it would have taken me, you know, 4 times as long. That would have been 4 different pans. So this is awesome. But now we have to still heat set our yarn mop. So I am going to come in and bring this. I'm just sort of slowly adding it here into this dye bath. And we're letting these colors sort of spread out a little bit. You can see that we're getting a little bit of bleeding down there, maybe where there was a little bit more powder. But this is just gonna kind of create a random soft variegated yarn. And I'm gonna turn on the heat here and heat this for 30 minutes to set the color on our mop. And I think on camera right now you're not seeing as much of the teal and green. It's looking very, very blue, but I promise those colors are there. And as for our yarn, I need to let it finish cooling so that way we can wash it. Let's start washing our yarn. Now, there will be differences in between all of the different skeins, not just when we had some navy come up, like on that bottom one. I think that's the bottommost one from pan 1. But also clearly you can see the length of the bright aqua varies from skein to skein. And so we'll take a look and see what similarities we see in the mini skeins from each bundle. But I'm gonna add some dish soap to our water. The yarn is completely cool. The one place where we could probably get some bleeding is from these zip ties. Because I don't think I've submerged them and there could be some dye on top of them. But I'm not seeing, I've got 400 grams of yarn right here, I'm not seeing any color come out in the water. So I'm gonna go ahead and rinse out the soap, put all the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry so we can look at the finished yarn. The yarn mops are looking blue and teal and very, very soft and pretty. I don't know if I said, but these are 20-gram minis. And so in the Chanukah samplers I make, people get a bonus 20-gram skein that's from one of the videos. So anyway, I'm not expecting to see any bleeding here either. We'll add some soap. And then this is gonna go through the spin dryer with the rest of the yarn, and I'll show it off once it's dry in the end as well. Can you believe how much yarn we dyed in one pan? And we got so much color coverage with layering and layering the colors. There are very few light patches in here. And yes, there's some sections where maybe some colors are longer, although this one may have slipped on the zip tie a little bit. And we do, from our bright aqua, have a little pop of some bright green right here. That's something that can happen. And it would probably not have happened if I was using liquid dyes versus using the powders. But the overall consistency is incredible. The only thing I wish is that I had gone a little bit heavier with the navy to make that a little bit deeper. Oftentimes I feel that way. I'm like, okay, I could have pushed this more, gone a little darker, because it's hard when the yarn is wet. It always looks darker than it does. And I never want to do so much dye that like it will bleed or won't set well. And well, I think that what we created here today is magical. Our yarn mop from today is way more subtle blending of the 3 colors that we used, which doesn't make it any less beautiful, but these 3 colors work together so well. I know I'm gonna have to play with this palette more in the future in many different applications. I mean, the bright aqua and the teal green balance together so well as a bright and deeper sort of color that are in the same family, and then the navy just works with so many things. The navy works with almost anything. I mean, we could have done this with like a bright pink, a more raspberry pink, and the navy, or a number of other similar kinds of concepts. There could be a whole rainbow of family like this with the navy down at the end. And I believe I even debated before ultimately going with this palette, but I love where we ended up. And now I need to go twist up all of my mini skeins. Even though our yarn mop is a yarn mop, I feel like this kind of more random, soft, variegated kind of colorway is the kind of thing I dye a lot more than tonight's colorway, where we have 3 colors, that there is a softness to it as well and a blending of the colors, but it is more repeating. It wouldn't be great for planned pooling, but likely will pool depending on the circumstances and how it's worked up. You know, this might not always be the way I would choose to twist this type of colorway up. I'm holding the yarn at the lightest end and twisting from the navy. Some other times I might sort of move it around so that way the colorway looks, I guess, a little bit less regular. But I'm enjoying how this is going to look in comparison with the other mini skeins I've already twisted up for Chanukah. And so therefore, I'm excited. The fact that doing the colorways this way, layering it in a pan, worked so well with both maintaining the color placement and setting the colors overall and getting things really, really well saturated, and there wasn't a lot of white left behind or colors bleeding into the wrong spots. This is opening up a huge amount of possibility for things that I can do as a small batch dyer. Because otherwise, if I was limited to just 3 skeins in a pan, something like this would take a lot longer, because I'd have to, the setup time overall might be similar, but I'd have to wait for them to heat set. And so if I even had a large plastic tub, I could set something like this up with sufficient acid and let it sit outside for a while for the colors to strike, and then finish heat setting it in a way that, again, would let me assembly line more yarn in a really great way. So anyway, there are great possibilities here that I'm very excited about exploring more in the future. And I know that this looks especially satisfying because the mini skeins have so many more twists per their length. But I just think these look so cool. I cannot wait to hear what you think of the technique and colorway down in the comments. I struggled with this video, but not for the reasons why you might think. A lot of times when I try something new and it works so well, I want to do it again and again and again. And I had to really keep myself from doing this technique and layering the colors like this in some ChemKnits dye-along live streams and things, because I think I filmed this in late August, early September. I film Chanukah usually towards the end of the summer, and so I didn't want to feature a discovery and be referencing this video as the first time I did it a ton in videos that were going to come out before Chanukah. And so that was my struggle. And there may have been, therefore, some videos where I started off with no acid and did variegated yarn and talked about how I hadn't done it in a long time. And this was where I had done it first. But I didn't layer colors yet like this. I'm really, really excited to try this technique again. And because I adore both the colors, but how it worked to speed things up. Because when you're dyeing a lot of yarn, the rate limiting step for me isn't the actual dyeing process, but it's the heat setting process. And so if there's a way that, you know, maybe you have a steam cupboard and so you can dye and heat multiple pans at once, that's great. But if you don't have that, this worked. This worked and I'm thrilled. I've already asked you to subscribe, but if you are looking for other ways to help support the content here, you can join to become a channel member and get some fun little perks, such as custom ChemKnits emotes that you can be using in the chat and badges next to your name that sort of indicate how long you have been a channel member. Or you can go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop, which is filled with hand-dyed yarn featured in my videos. And so you can watch me dye the yarn and bring it home and turn it into something wonderful. All of this helps support the content. And Yeah, thank you so much for all of your support. I have so much fun filming these special series, and I really hope that you enjoy them too. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching!